When the pressure is high and the energy low, that's when your business needs inspiration to change and to grow. It's also when true captains show up. Hi, I'm Mark Francis, and I'm the host of this podcast that invites industry leaders from all over the world to answer the question, who's your captain? When you need to motivate and to mobilize, to develop and enable your team. Whether you are new to being a leader or you aspire to be a captain, this podcast is for you. I am so excited to be joined by Callum Woodcock for lots of reasons, Callum, because who's your captain? You're the captain. You're the captain of change in terms of wine investment with your amazing business called WineFi. Welcome, Callum.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a privilege to be here.
That's so cool. Now, I'm a wine lover, and in a very simplistic way, I guess I'm an investor. I tend to drink everything I buy. I have just, because I'm in California at the moment, I've just bought this wonderful wine. It's called Patrimony. It's definitely on the high scale in terms of value, but also taste. And I know as someone who loves wine, it's definitely going to grow in value. If I lay this down for 15 years, there's no guarantees, as I'm sure you'll tell us, but my instinct is that will probably double in value over that period, if not more. What's your advice if I'm someone who's just beginning on the investment of wine front?
Surely. Sure. Well, first off, a great choice. I believe that's a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's known as Napa's First Growth.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think, for someone that's just getting started with wine investment, the first decision is whether or not it's the right asset class for you. And I appreciate that sounds like a very boring example, but we have seen some businesses promote wine as if it's crypto. It's a speculative thing that you can come in and out of within a year and make super outsized returns on. And don't get me wrong, that is possible. It's just very unusual. The way that we talk about investing in wine is a very similar way to the way that people talk about investing in residential property, meaning it is a medium to long-term hold. The second question that you have to ask is how you want to gain exposure. So once you've decided that the wine as an asset class is right for you, there are different vehicles you can use to gain exposure. Now, the most common one is you work with a wine merchant, to build your own portfolio. The upside of that approach is that you're in control. You can take the wines out of storage, should you so choose, out of bond in order to consume them. The downside is it's quite an expensive endeavor, and merchants are overwhelmingly set up for kind of collecting for pleasure rather than investing for financial profit. And then you have specialist investment businesses like WineFi, and you have different structures. Should you be investing through a wine fund, for example, or syndicates, which is one of the options that we offer. So it's about, I think, ensuring that you understand the characteristics of the asset class and then deciding how you want to gain exposure once you have.
What I love about this already is that I'm getting a lovely flavor for your business called WineFi, and we're going to talk much more about it because it's an industry-changing business. That's the exciting bit. And you as a founder, CEO, visionary in terms of the industry.
Thank you very much.
Of course, we're already hearing this lovely balance because you're an asset manager, aren't you? And a lover of wine. Now that's relatively unusual. And of course, it's the foundation of your organization, WineFi, and we're going to talk a lot more about it. The thing for me is, how do you marry the two? Because you do have a background in asset management. It's your core vocation. And now you see real value in making wine the center of the investment, hence WineFi as a business. How do you marry the two?
So I think my honest answer to that would be controversially. I think that people tend to get very excited about the idea that their passion could also be a financial asset. Now, all of our data proves that since 2011, fine wine has behaved much more like a financial asset than a luxury good. So it's impacted, for example, by falls in the value of the pound because wine is denominated internationally in GBP. Interest rate changes have an impact on the price performance of a wine. So it is undoubtedly an asset. but it is also a consumable. It's a drink. It's something that people are really passionate about. It's a hobby first and foremost. When we started the business, we had a theory that we would be attracting a new demographic to the wine trade, not just a younger one, but one that was predominantly viewing wine through an investor's lens and who may not have had that underlying passion for wine. Unfortunately, we've slightly disproved our own hypothesis on that front, because I would say about 80% of our investors have an interest in wine as a consumable, as in like a real interest in wine, a passion for wine, you might say. But we still do have 20% who are purely looking at it as an investable. And because we can offer a cost-effective way of gaining exposure to fine wine as an asset class, these people go, okay, this is perfectly uncorrelated to mainstream equities. It's capital gains tax exempt if I'm in the UK. And it's the interesting part of my portfolio. So I think the incentives for people investing are varied, but the majority do have an interest in wine, but they probably bulk at paying, the average bottle price within one of our portfolios on average is £500. And that's for a single bottle. And it can go as high as 25,000 or more for a single bottle.
So this lovely Cab Sauvignon is actually about £250.
Yeah.
So is that not really in the range, or is it in the lower end of the range in your investments?
It's a great question. And we've had to create these rules ourselves because, we have a vast data set, and we basically have to decide on what the start point for investment grade wine is. So just very, very briefly, we do have a price threshold, but the price threshold is quite low. So £60 is where our data models start. If it's below £60, we just wouldn't include it, because otherwise.
And is 60? Is that luxury, or is that not yet luxury? Is that just a real premium wine?
It's a great question, because it can vary, and I'm going to offend absolutely every wine producer listening to this podcast by saying it, but
I've got lots of wine producing customers. Yeah, I've got wine producing customers. So tread carefully, Callum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the definitive thing when it comes to investment in wine is wine pays no yield. You need to be able, as the investor, to sell the wine on to someone. And if you want to make money on it, you need to be able to sell it on a higher price than you paid for it yourself. That sounds obvious, but a lot of people don't really understand it. So that means that the wine must, by definition, have a secondary market price. So it must be traded on the secondary market. I joked about offending my father-in-law. So he's in the wine trade. He's deputy chairman of a fantastic English sparkling wine business called Gusbourne, which is, served on BA first class. You know it well. Yeah. So top premium wine, but I would never invest in it at this stage because there is no secondary market for it. It's not traded. Yeah. So that's the distinction. So it could be an excellent luxury wine, but still not be investment grade if that secondary market isn't there.
So I'm going to ask you 5 quick questions to help orientate, because that was a very fast start, which I love. Question number 1: When did you become founder and CEO of WineFi? How long have you been CEO?
Yeah, sure. So we incorporated the business in May 2023, and I went full time on the business in October 2023.
Cool, wonderfully new entrepreneurial business. Awesome. How many people do you employ? Because I can imagine it's data driven, so you need some experts there. How many people in the team, operational team?
Sure. So we're currently 7 full-time employees and 5 or 6 full-time consultants.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. How many wine investors do you have? And you might not want to share that, but if you can, give us a flavor for how many have you got?
Sure. So directly about 600. So quite a few. And then indirectly, so through partners that have put together fractional structures, I would imagine the thousands. We don't have visibility on that data.
Oh, that's really cool. Last quick fire question. What's the growth trajectory of WineFi?
Sure. So far we've remained in full hypergrowth, based on the definition of hypergrowth for our stage. That has occurred in a market that has largely fallen. So the market hit all-time highs. The wine markets hit all-time highs in October 2022, and it dropped consistently until Q3 last year. We are now in the early stages of recovery. So the markets have risen, which is very much encouraging. but we would hope to dramatically accelerate our growth. Moving forwards, we really want to be in the 100 to 300% category, because we believe there is a winner takes all opportunity here. And we think, based on what we're doing on the data side and the performance of our investment product, we're coming up to a 3-year track record on our investment products. We should be, we are undoubtedly the data leader in the wine investment space. And I always feel like our performance as a business hasn't caught up with that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And, you and I spoke before around so brilliantly data driven. So you have, was it something like 38 or 39 criteria by which you judge the investment potential of a wine?
Yes.
About right.
So this is, I will try and keep this as unnerdy as possible and probably fail. And it's worth also saying I can't take, the clock is on. And I can't take responsibility for our data models. That's our brilliant head of data. But the thing that is different about wine versus other collectibles, so watches, whiskey, classic cars, art, that sort of category of asset, is that there is real-time trading data, not auction data, although we also have that, real-time trading data going back 26 years. And what that means is that you can test and train machine learning models on that data to understand what factors, when introduced, influence the price performance of a wine. So at a very basic level, that could be something like a critic score, a critic rescore, or a vintage quality. And what we do at WineFi is we introduce as many variables as we can, their hypotheses, and then we back test on real data to say, okay, well, if we introduce this new variable, does it impact the price performance of a wine? And if it does, we include it. If it doesn't, we exclude it, obviously. So far we have 38 variables or 39 variables.
Cool, I wasn't far. Yeah, there you go. I wasn't far off. Yeah.
Yeah, included.
I'm proud of myself.
You've done your homework. It's fantastic.
I've listened. I think I might have listened.
But we've tested upwards of 80. So, there's a lot that goes into this. And to me, this is probably the most exciting part of the business because the wine markets are so inefficient. It's like the early days of Bitcoin, not to compare wine to crypto, but, where you can spot these market inefficiencies.
Totally get it. I totally get it. And it's a real strength of your business. There's no question, because it's a reassurance, isn't it? You can never guarantee when you're talking about any investment, but it's a massive reassurance when you say we've applied 39 criteria that suggest this is a brilliant investment. So I absolutely love that. One of the things I love about modern technology, AI, is that you can, and I've used ChatGPT for this. I've said, what makes Callum Woodcock unique?
Oh, God.
This is really cool. We could ask your wife or your mum, but actually, we should actually. That'd be fun.
She'd have nothing good to say about me.
Yeah. Would she say this? I like this. Multi-award-winning entrepreneur. That's not bad, is it? I like that.
So you very nice from ChatGPT.
You won Wine Investment Company of the Year. You won Entrepreneur of the Year in a sector. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What else? You are a unique balance between fintech and wine. So wine and investment, asset investment. It's unique, which is really cool.
Sure.
You're a visionary. You want to democratize wine.
We do.
There it is. We're going to have to talk about that. And then data-driven transparency. So this is the point that says, I'm investing in this wine. Well, the data is suggesting that's a smart investment, and you're helping me make that call. Love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about visionary.
Okay.
And it's, why did you set the business up? What's the big goal for WineFi?
Sure. So the vision of the business is and has always been the same, which is to make it possible for fine wine to form a part of every portfolio for the very first time.
Like it.
Note the make it possible, because it isn't an appropriate investment for everyone, but does it have the characteristics of an asset class that can play a role in a portfolio? Absolutely, yes. And the people that say it doesn't don't understand it. That's the honest, blunt truth. Whilst, absolutely I'm passionate about wine, we started the business because we saw the opportunity here, not because we wanted to work in wine. The commercial opportunity was the core focus. And I think that matters because it means that to a degree we are unbiased. We didn't have to start this business. We could have started a different type of business whilst also being into wine. Um, so, I think that vision's important. And the reason that I say I think it's important is because it encapsulates so much. It sounds a little bit like a headline, but actually, when you think about it, it means one, if we want fine wine to be able to feasibly form a part of every portfolio for the very first time, the cost of entry needs to be low enough that most investors would be happy allocating to it. We need to be transparent enough that people understand what they're investing in. We need to have fiduciary protections and responsibilities in place, which is so key in a market which has historically attracted a number of bad actors and is unregulated. That's a big hurdle to get over. And I think more than anything else, we need to be where our investors are. If the only way to access fine wine is through a wine merchant, or even going to our website and investing directly through the website, when your usual process is to use Hargreaves Lansdown or Revolut or Nutmeg, whatever your preferred wealth management platform is, that's additional friction for you as the user. And as a result, you will naturally separate wine from your other investments in your head. So there's a number of different factors that come into that vision, but I like it because I think it's clear.
I like it. It is clear. I like it. It's compelling. All good vision should be.
Thank you.
Now, one of the things you've done brilliantly well, in my view, looking from the outside in, is surround yourself with really smart business people who are your non-execs, who have been mega successful in famous businesses like head of crowdfunding, things like that. It's really, really cool. How did you make that happen? How did you surround yourself with people who are really great advisors for business growth?
Sure. So I agree with you. I think we could be very critical of our own business, but I think one area where we have got it right actually is on the advisory front. We feel very well advised. It really came from a lot of, I guess, pain actually is the right word, I experienced in my early entrepreneurial journey. And I'm of that generation. My dad's an entrepreneur, kind of a self-made entrepreneur. And I'm of that generation that grew up with the kind of beginnings of that sort of cult of the entrepreneur. So, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, now Musk and Zuckerberg, et cetera, being really held up as these kind of titans of industry, for better or for worse. And I think that I always had this idea that it didn't count to be a founder unless, one, the idea was super new and super innovative, which WineFi is not. I think we've added tech-driven and innovative elements to something that is hundreds of years old, in terms of wine investment, let alone wine itself, it's 6,000 years old. So I thought the idea had to be super unique. And obviously there is no such thing as a super unique idea. And I also I thought I had to do it myself or it didn't count. And everything for me...
That's the key, isn't it? That's the key.
Absolutely. And
surround yourself with experts.
100%. And everything for me started to accelerate. I mean, JK, the former chief growth officer of Crowdcube that you messaged there.
John Keeling.
Johnny Keeling. Yeah, Johnny Keeling. Yeah. That's it. So I basically, when I was like, how the hell do I get a mentor? And I know that sounds really basic, but I wanted to be a founder. I didn't know how to go about being a founder. And I basically I was a salesperson at the time, and I went on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and I just filtered by my school, because I thought if someone had been to the same school, they might be more willing to talk to me. And I just reached out cold to 10 people. I think JK was probably the only one that replied. And I was awestruck at this point. I'm 31 now. At the time, I was probably in my early 20s.
Very cool.
And it really snowballed from there. And it was just the value of that relationship just made me think I should be like any weak spot of the business, we should be surrounding ourselves with experts in. And also it's actually very important from a credibility standpoint.
It is.
One of the big things that has really helped is having the CEO of a business called Coterie, which is one of the largest, most prestigious
wine business. Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome business.
But it means that people just are like, oh well, if someone's done the due diligence of that business and this guy's on the board, they aren't a scam.
It's a signal.
You're like, they're a legitimate business. And in an unregulated market, that's so important.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge, and good for you. There's a real nugget in what you shared here, and it's worth me replaying it. Get yourself a mentor, so please be bold, please be entrepreneurial, start a great new business, be the captain of your business, but also find other captains. Captains who've done it before. You've also got the chairman of Lucky Saint, who is it's a brilliant brand story, And so brand building, and WineFi is a brand. So how do you build the brand? So it increases awareness. So it's really smart. Be
Yeah.
a mentor, be mentored. And that's a big message on this. How do
Yeah.
you develop yourself now? So the next phase of great leaders, great captains is development. How are you developing yourself? Because it's still wonderfully new, isn't it? You're into your
Yeah.
third year. It's brilliantly new. How do you keep developing yourself as a leader?
It's a great question. So I have a tendency, I think, to be overly self-critical, and that's a tendency that third parties, my mentors, advisors, or whatever, have identified, and they're like, I don't think this is necessarily a useful, because there's a difference between ownership, which is what I think it is. We're building something, and I've got huge plans for it, and I don't want to accept, failure is not an option. In my
Yeah,
view.
yeah.
But at the same time, you can be overly critical. So I'm super aware of that. Obviously, we've touched on the mentorship piece already. I've been asked to be an NED for a younger founder who is building something in the wine space. I can't touch too much on it at the moment, but he's got this fantastic concept. And strangely, I found that really fulfilling just talking
that's
to him,
great.
because it feels like I'm a piano teacher who's learning piano at the same time as their student, but is like 2 lessons ahead. But you do forget how much actually, when you're constantly thinking about how much you need to learn, and oh God, we've got a long way to go before we've achieved X, Y, Z. I think that mentoring, and this sounds very selfish, and I kind of mean it to be, it's as much for you as it is for them. And
That's huge.
Fergus Dyer Smith, who's one of my NEDs, serial entrepreneur, he said something to me when I asked him to come on board, and we get on very well. He's a natural founder. But he said, I really look forward to the day where you say, Fergus, I'm no longer finding our conversations especially useful, because it shows I would have done my job.
God, that's
So I
cool.
thought that's
Yeah,
an
that's very cool.
amazing low ego thing to say.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. So that's one of them. And the other one that I'm finding really nice at the moment is London startup land, as you know, is pretty small. Everyone knows everyone, especially if they're around the same age. And I've started speaking to a lot more founders in a casual context, because there is a sense of shared experience. And just to relay an anecdote, I probably shouldn't name the company because I don't think he'd thank me, but massive UK startup land darling, has raised 100 million plus. That narrows down the pool
cool.
of companies.
Doesn't it?
Anyway, I'm good friends with the CEO and have been. We actually grew up together, and he's done amazingly well. And we had a phone call the other day because I was hiring for a certain role, and someone who had worked at his company had applied. And from the outside, it looks like his business is going fantastically well. And he just went on the phone. He goes, "How shit is running a startup?" And actually hearing from like a business that I kind of idolize, actually he's got his own problems. The LinkedIn victory parade isn't necessarily what it's all cracked up to be. It's very like, I don't know, it's very reassuring, because it's like, okay, it's supposed to be uncertain. It's supposed to be chaotic at times. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, now here's the thing, and I'm going to just shout out. This is called Who's Your Captain, and you're the captain. You're the captain of this business. You're the leader. You're driving it. You're owning it, and you're wise enough to know you need several other captains, whether they're the head of your operation, the head of data, or there's someone who is your mentor, and so they're the captains as well. That's the point. And asking for help is a really smart thing to do. Just like now that you're a non-exec director, a mentor classically is someone who just shares experience. Here is my experience of 3 years of starting up a company. You're just about to do it. So let me share the advice. Let me share the pitfalls. Let me share the reality, so that you don't have to go through that pain as much as I might have done. Really cool, the role of a mentor.
Yeah.
What would you say as an entrepreneur, Callum? What are your top tips? Let's imagine people are listening and going, I am going to start my own business at last. I've been dilly-dallying, but now I'm ready to go. What would you say your top tips for someone starting a business?
Sure. I've thought about this loads. The first one, I'll touch on this so briefly, is start with a revenue model, not the idea. I think a lot of people, how many people have you spoken to who have an idea for an app? And then when you actually talk about how you could monetize that app, they kind of go, no, it doesn't really matter. or they come up with some half-assed solution.
Matter.
Yeah, 100%. You will make yourself unbelievably miserable if you haven't figured out the revenue model for a business first and foremost.
I love that. But that's your asset management background, isn't it? That's your finance background. Get the money right, and then the idea could flourish.
Yeah,
that's big. That's big.
Absolutely. And also, the last thing you want to do is spend 10 years of your life on a business that doesn't make you that much money or doesn't make shareholders that much money. And that's not that's not because I'm super money orientated. It's just, cash flow is clearly the way of a business keeping score,
Absolutely.
So, and I think it's too easy to lose sight of that, especially given, every entrepreneur is passionate about whatever concept they're working on. And at some point, and I've seen this with other founders, they kind of lose sight of the fact that what they're starting is still a business. That's the whole idea of going into business, right? It's not a hobby. It does have to be a money-making venture. So I'm going to start with that slightly gauche example to start with. And then there are two others that are like critically important. And one of the mistakes I made over and over and over again in the 7 years where I thought about nothing apart from starting a business and just failed to do so at great personal cost and stress to myself. I was so frustrated and, I never want anyone else to necessarily go through that feeling. But I did the classic entrepreneurial pattern of coming up with what I thought was a great idea, doing research and getting really optimistic. I'd buy the domain name, I'd buy the logo, I'd put together a one-page business plan, and then I'd read more into the idea and I would figure out all the hard bits. And I would say, oh, actually, this is way more difficult than I thought. And I would go into this kind of unrealistic pessimism or realistic pessimism slide.
Realistic pessimism.
Yeah, exactly. But it is realistic pessimism because you're like, oh, maybe this isn't a walk in the park. But at that point, in most cases, that's where you should try and push through. And the easiest thing to do is to go, I'll go back and find an easier idea. And actually, I found that no idea is that easy. If you think about something enough, there's always going to be complexity in it. So, I think my second tip would just be push through that initial phase and know that it's normal.
Wow. So, revenue model, make sure you're going to make money. Point number one, revenue model. Point number two, it sounded to me like be bold, stay on it. Don't give up when you start to see one or two cracks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess the final thing would just be, and again, this sounds like a cop-out answer, but I really mean it, is be aware of your strengths and weaknesses. What I think I'm good at is sales and getting people excited about the business. I've sold investment products before and I'm genuinely excited about the business. I can see that's, it gets other people going as well. What I'm terrible at is like the operational side of the business. People always forget because we are a fintech platform. It involves moving millions of pounds of wine around, right? I'm useless at that. My brain just isn't that. It doesn't look at operations in the right way. And, our operations director is fantastic at that. But if I had continued trying to run operations, we would never have been able to scale that the way that we have. Equally, fine, I can do a tiny bit of coding, but I would never have the ability to build the data models that our head of data has built. So I think also, recognizing that you don't have to shoulder every burden, especially as a younger entrepreneur, because I think you feel like there's everything to prove. And again, like there is the myth around the entrepreneur that, Elon Musk sleeping on the floor of his office every night, running every part of the business by themselves. Fine, it's good to get an understanding of it, but actually you will trip yourself up if you don't delegate in the right way. And, one of the most clarifying conversations I've ever had was around my job as a CEO effectively being bang the drum for the business, set the strategy and make sure the company doesn't run out of money and then, hire other people to kind of do everything else. And it's very relaxing is the wrong word, but it does make you feel better because otherwise your remit is so broad as the founder that, you will just burn out or work on the wrong things. And actually hiring great people, there is no shame in that. Even at a very, very early stage. Yeah.
And when we first spoke, you spoke about the 7 members of your team and you spoke incredibly highly about that. You've hired really well. Of course, that's an essential. That's great. So 3 big tips. Make sure you've got your revenue straight. Be bold, stay on it. And then it's really delegate, actually, is a big point here. Recruit great people to do the things that actually either you're not good at doing or you shouldn't be doing because you should have other things on your plate. Really cool. Thank you. How do you now enable your business to? I'm going to say be sustainable. So
Yeah.
this point about enable is even if you stepped away, it would just
Yeah.
continue. So what's
Yeah.
the plan to make it a sustainably successful business?
It's a really great question, and it ties quite neatly into that piece around delegation. Clearly for a business to be sustainable, it needs to work without the founders or even the founding team in place. One thing that we put off for too long was having a formal budget, and we told ourselves that we're too small, it's too early, it's a waste of time, and the business really started cooking, for want of a better word, when we had a bottom up budget where we have our partnerships revenue, we have our growth spend, and we have our sales, and you have a plan that then ladders up to those top line numbers. And that one allowed us to get a real performance grip on the business. So rather than me having to constantly be popping up and asking people questions and checking Slack, it was like, okay, we can now have one meeting a week with all of the relevant channel leads, and we understand what needs to improve, what needs to change, what's going well, what's going not so well. And I think that's the first part. Making the business so someone else other than you can understand it is really important. And I naively underestimated that, I think, early days.
That's huge because it's also succession planning, isn't it? You mentioned delegate, and that's to do the job well, but it's also about who's the successor for your head of data if they decide to move on, or indeed who is your successor.
Yeah.
And so what's the strategy there in terms of making sure people are there to replace some of your key players?
Yeah, sure. So we talk about this a lot around the idea that we shouldn't have a single point of failure. And some of this is very boring. So it means having documented SOPs. It also means ensuring that everything is visible, or everything that needs to be visible is visible to the team. We use Notion, as I'm sure many of your listeners do, as an internal intranet and knowledge base. We keep that very organized. So, in the event that I was hit by a bus, someone would be able to go on and see where all of our customer contracts are. They'd be able to go and see, key details relating to our various different bank accounts and everything that goes with it. So I think
this is such an important point, Callum. I want to reiterate it when you mention SOPs. And it might be that we have entrepreneurs that actually don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's vital, standard operating procedure. And so this is how we do stuff around here. And it doesn't matter if everyone leaves. If you bring in an expert in that particular field, they'll be able to pick up that SOP and just deliver it. So it's massive there, particularly as entrepreneurs, because most entrepreneurial businesses do not have standard operating procedures. Yeah. We just do what happens when it happens. And that's huge. So that's a massive point, and good for you for doing that. Yeah. What else? What else do you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I was about to say, so on the SOP point, you're right. A lot of founders don't know about these things. I think we do because we've raised venture capital, and that whole legacy, or not legacy planning, but what happens if you weren't around is a key part of that, because ultimately for a business to be acquirable, you need to have that in place. But I had my mind blown. I went to an Alex Hormozy seminar, who is a favorite of mine, just because I find it, the way that he simplifies information, really, really, powerful. And a friend and I flew out to Las Vegas. And we paid $2,000 or whatever to go to a 2-day course. Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating. But the first day they were breaking down all of the stuff that we would have on our P&L for every board meeting we have. And I was sitting next to these two older guys from Texas who were running a roofing company, and they were turning over about 3x more than us, about $15 million. And they just did not understand, they didn't have any of the basic business terminology. And they weren't running accounts. But they were making, as I said, 3x more money than we did. And they had come to it because they wanted to professionalize the business. And you could so see how, having reporting structured in the right way, where everyone talks about, something as simple for a business like ours, AUM is not the same as turnover, and turnover is not the same as margin or sales or whatever. And ensuring that you've got a really robust performance framework in place that everyone understands within the company is a weirdly simple thing, but it took us quite a long time to get to. You know,
I think it's huge,
So,
Callum. This is
yeah,
huge. As someone who, I'm someone who's been a leader of a business, but I'm more
of
around
course.
learning and development. Hence the
Yeah.
podcast. Really, it's to share learning. And
Hmm.
one of my greatest sort of learnings myself is this idea that says, does everyone in your team know what really good looks like?
Yeah.
And number one, have you been explicit about that? And number two, are you
Hmm.
managing or observing or making sure it happens? Some sort of performance management. Otherwise, it's utterly random and there's no
Yeah.
feedback and there's no
Mhm.
consistency. So it's vital, actually. It's absolutely vital. You have some form of performance framework for sure.
Yeah. 100%. It also means that, and I don't mean this in a sinister way, there is nowhere to hide. That we are a remote first team. We do have office space, but we have employees based in London, in the Lake District, in Spain. And actually that requires a different way of communicating. You really
It
have to be able
totally
to work
does.
asynchronously, and you really need, your written communication really needs to be good. But ultimately, you want, especially on something as important as like the commercial side, you want to be able to see where the bottlenecks are. If revenue is down, what has outreach been like? How many meetings are we having? What's the show rate for those meetings? So you can really reverse engineer and work out where the bottleneck is. And then you can kind of work out whether it's a positioning issue, whether it's market forces, for want of a better word, or whether actually someone is being a bit lazy that week. So all of it's quite interesting.
I'm now going to just turn back to WineFi in the sense that
Yep.
I'm hoping you've whet everyone's appetite for the idea that wine investment is a smart asset investment. It's to grow my assets, I'm going to invest in wine.
Yeah.
It's your platform is relatively accessible, isn't it? If I've
Yep.
got what would it need? Something like £3,000 to invest in wine. Would that be the start point?
Yeah. So we offer a syndicate structure as well as private portfolios, but our syndicate structure allows you to gain diversified exposure to a curated portfolio of wine at a fraction of the cost of owning that underlying portfolio outright. So, when we talk about democratization, that is part of it. So to invest directly, as you say, it's £3,000, so around $4,000. But, we work with partners like Splint Invest, who allow people to invest in our portfolios from as little as $50. So we have,
Wow.
really, we've tried to make it really as accessible as possible. That said, we are slightly reluctant to because I don't think it should be a mass market investment. In the UK, for example, you should be maxing out your ISAs and probably doing some SEIS, EIS investing prior to looking at wine. But for those that have decided that they want to gain exposure, we want that to be achievable for normal investors. So, Henry's
That makes
high
perfect
earners, not
sense.
rich yet, or high net worths. Yeah.
I love that. And so classically, because I know the wine
Mm,
industry really well, this is
of course.
not a short term, is it? Is it something like, you got to be in there for 3 years to really get value? Is it something like that? What's the term?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because we see a lot of nonsense from the wine trade in general. So wine merchants always talk about, and we're not, wine merchants. Many of our partners are wine merchants. This isn't me having a pop at them, but you often see that you have to buy wines very young, upon release, ideally, and hold them for 10, 15 years to make any money.
Yeah.
That fits perfectly with the way that wine merchants make money because they buy wines on release and sell them on to their customers. So it's in their incentive to pass that on as quickly as possible. The truth, and we've proven this through data, is actually you can see when a certain wine or a certain region is typically appreciating the fastest. So there's an article on our website if your listeners want to check it out, which talks about red Burgundy specifically. And we've proven through data that actually the best time to buy the Burgundy market on average is 4 years after it's been bottled.
Oh, wow.
And our job as an asset manager is to capture the most, the greatest period of appreciation. So all of our syndicates run for an anticipated holding period of 5 years, but all of our
There you
modeling
go.
is around
That's it.
4 years. Yeah. So we allow some margin for error. And I don't know about you, but that's much more palatable to me as an investor than knowing that my cash is going to be tied up for 10 years. Most people who own a home treat their home in that way, but it's very different because you're living in it. It provides a practical benefit other than just being part of your portfolio. So we've really tried to optimize
useful.
around that.
Yeah, I love it. It's because it's super clear for everyone listening in that this is how it works. That's really cool. Thank you. I've got 2 more questions, and they're big questions actually. For your business now, started in 2023 in handsome growth, doing really well with great people in the team. It's a lovely setup. What's your biggest challenge now?
Sure. So I think unit economics.
Wow, you're going to have to explain that.
Sorry, yeah, sure. So essentially, for a business to be successful and to remain in hypergrowth longer term, you need to be able to put $1 into the business or £1 into the business and get ideally a multiple of that back. So if you have positive unit economics, that would be $1.01. But really, investors look to a 3-to-1 LTV to CAC, which just means the lifetime value of a customer should be 3 times the cost of acquiring that customer. So, once you have that in place, then in theory, all other things being equal, if you put 100 grand into the business, if let's say it's 3-to-1 LTV to CAC, you get 300K back. And that's where you really need to be for sustained hypergrowth. I think we I don't want to say got lucky, but I think we have a social media presence and we've had some very successful partnerships that have almost allowed us as a business to get away without really understanding our unit economics. And for the next phase of growth, as we mature as a business, we need to get a handle on them. So we've hired a head of growth to head up performance marketing. But that's the key focus for this year. We think we'll be able to get to a 2-to-1 LTV to CAC. But I was talking to one of my board directors, this time last year, and I said, I was complaining about our unit economics. I said, we really need to get a handle on them. And he said, I imagine at the moment you put $1 in, you get 83 cents back or something, right? And I sort of had to confess that actually, it was more like we put $1 in and then I didn't know what happened to the dollar.
Exactly, don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So we've improved on that, but we need to nail it this year. Otherwise, it's not a long-term sustainable business.
Love it. Last question. What's essential, apart from what you've just described, to ensure sustainable, I love the word hypergrowth, by the way. I'm going to use it at least twice today just to remember it. So hypergrowth, what's an absolute essential to ensure that's sustainable?
Sure. So I think, there's multiple answers that I could have given to this question, but I think being able to exit wines at scale, this is where other businesses in our space have got into trouble because unlike, just to choose another collectible like art, for example, you can keep trading a painting for hundreds of years, thousands of years, whatever. With wine, it does hit a point where someone has to want to drink the wine. Yeah, exactly. So it hits its peak drinking window. So you need to be able to access an audience of drinkers because you can't continue to sell a wine on to new investors coming in if that wine is not likely to appreciate in value. And that is a core focus. And also one of the reasons why we were so delighted to take investment from Coterie, because they have a network of wine merchants who have an audience that is willing to pay for aged wine at the peak of its drinking window because it's at its best. And so it's quite a symbiotic relationship, but we have been, really looking at some businesses in the space that have really suffered during the market downturn because, if someone has either been slightly missold or slightly misunderstood the asset class and they think it's super liquid and you should be able to trade out of it as you would a stock, we always tell our investors it's more similar to residential property. It can take several months unless you're willing to take a haircut to sell down a portfolio. But what we see is, if you look at some wine investment business websites, a few people leave bad reviews to say, I can't get my wines out. I asked them to sell my wines like 4 months ago.
Been there.
Well, exactly. And the problem is it starts a bit of a bank run, even if that company is doing everything right. And it's just it's just market conditions because people see those negative reviews. They then go, oh shit, I should try and get pardon my language, I should try and get my wines out. And that just triggers this kind of ongoing crisis. And we've seen that, really impact a couple of market participants. And, we are really trying to structure the business, before we've got 100 million plus, for example, under management, to ensure that doesn't happen to us.
That's just brilliant, Callum. It's been fascinating listening to you.
Likewise.
And the good news is that you're an asset for WineFi. Your brand is an asset for WineFi.
Thank you.
And it's really cool listening to you because it's triggering so many things in my head as someone who's passionate about wine and also in passionate about hypergrowth as well. Lots of learning for all of us. And I just want to say a huge thank you for being part of the program and for being Captain Callum Woodcock. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to join you.
Awesome. Thank you.